a general discussion about mental health. It is not to be interpreted as specific advice for a specific situation. Every situation is unique and requires advice to be tailored and adapted to that situation. All information in this broadcast is for educational and informational purposes only. It is not intended as a substitute for professional mental health services. If you or a loved one are experiencing mental health distress, please speak to a licensed professional in your area.
It's time to shine that light that lives in you. Living well. It's not too late to change. It's time to be the change. Living well. It's time to shine that light that lives in you. Living well. It's not too late to change. It's time to be the change.
Living Well takes a community. So remember to like and subscribe, and don't forget to share with a friend. Welcome to another episode of Living Well, where we attend to the mind, the heart, the body, and the soul. Now, if you remember, we're in the middle of a series called Black Love Christian Style, where we are talking about all things love and relationship. Today is going to be a fantastic day because we are talking about those things that you need to consider before you jump the broom, before you say I do, before you dedicate your life to that person that you love forever and ever. So stay tuned. We have an expert guest who does this all day, every day. He talks to couples about the health and the happiness of their relationship. So we're going to jump right into the water cooler and get right into that conversation. Stay tuned. All right, so if you've seen the show before, you know what time it is. It is time for the water cooler, where we come out of our psychologist's office, stand around the water cooler and catch up on hot topics, what folks are talking about, and things of interest. So we have a video for you today. So let's look at this video and then we're going to come back and talk about it.
So there's this woman on TikTok and she's like, do you want to know why your man's not doing what you ask him to do in your marriage? And this is what I think. I think the answer would have been for a lot of people's problems is counseling. Like, don't sleep on counseling. Premarital counseling, honestly, is the way to go. One, I'm just a huge advocate for counseling in general, regardless if you're single, married, thinking about getting married, whatever. All stages of life, it's very beneficial. However, I feel like knowing what, like, I'm just thinking, like, do I really want to be aligned with someone who our foundations of what we both need and want and expect in a marriage is not aligning? Probably not. That doesn't seem sustainable to me. I don't want to enter a lifelong commitment with someone where our foundations don't even align of like how we want, how this is going to work. And I think a lot of people are like, oh, I'm fine. I don't need counseling. It's not about you being fine or not. It's about, it's going to push your relationship into a way of like, you have to think about more than it allows you to think. And I think that's very important. I think a lot of people don't know what hard questions to ask. And I think having that mediator allows you to do that in a safe way. And honestly, ladies, don't sleep on it. Counseling is the way to go. And honestly, if my man was like, oh no, I don't need counseling, no thank you. If you can't even do the bare minimum and go to these counseling sessions, then you're probably going to try to do the bare minimum in our marriage. And I'm not about to have it. Seriously though, counseling, don't sleep on it. You will thank yourself later, ladies.
Well, all right, sis.
Thank you. She has spoken.
Exactly.
She had a word.
She had a word for today.
Yes.
Sis said, if you can't even do the bare minimum.
Thank you.
If you can't even do the bare minimum, are you going to go into this marriage, into this lifelong commitment, only doing the bare minimum?
Thank you.
I don't want the bare minimum.
That was the statement that stood out for me as well. Like, I don't want no parts of that, because you're not going to even bring your full self into the relationship. I like the fact that she also talked about how important it is to be with somebody, for the most part, that's like-minded. Mm-hmm. Like, we got to want the same thing, you know? And so that tells you that she's really thinking about what's really important. And it doesn't sound like it's anything surface.
Right.
You know, that's what I appreciate about that.
Right, exactly. This like-minded individuals, are we going in the same direction? We don't have to be doing all of the same things, but we should at least be, if I'm going east, can we both be going east? Or if you decide we're going to go west, let me make sure that, we both are going west instead of north and south. I mean,
Exactly.
that's what happens. It's so interesting to me how many folks don't think about going to premarital counseling or getting premarital education before they get married.
Mm-hmm.
If you think about it, 99.9% of people, even if they did not take a driver's ed course, because sometimes I don't think schools have those much anymore, but some do. But even if they didn't, most people got that driving book and flipped through it. Because who knows that you got to stop how many yards from a train track?
Right.
But that's a question. So most of us looked through that book, flipped through that book, read something before we went down there and took a driver's test.
Absolutely.
So why do we not think that learning a little bit about relationships, about marriage, about what that means, why do we think that that's unnecessary?
I have absolutely no idea. And you know what makes it so dangerous? Because you have those people who feel like, I've been knowing you for so long. We've been friends, or we've been together for so long. Most people, they have this false belief that since we've been together for so long that we really know each other. And so therefore we don't have to go and do, premarital counseling or anything like that. When you and I both know that, and most people even when they're together for a long time, I doubt very seriously if they are really sitting and thinking about the difficult questions, asking those questions and that really makes you think and reflect, like thinking about your future and long term. And I think that's also what happens. We've been together for so long, we don't need to. And that's
why I know several people who were together 7, 10, 11 years and then divorced when they got married after 3. Right? Because there's a difference. And those are the things that you learn when you go to premarital counseling or get premarital education. Another thing that I think, especially with the influence of social media, is that so many people are focused on the social media Instagrammability of the engagement and Instagrammability of the wedding. Like, so I'm focused on this outward show of, oh, he walked me through the sand and surprised me. I got my nails and hair done because I thought we were going on a date, and now it's on Instagram and everybody's like, oh, that's so beautiful. Or, I have this lavish, beautiful wedding. So all of my energy, no, I won't say all, but a huge portion of my energy goes into the wedding. And there is the bare minimal going into the marriage.
Exactly.
And a wedding is a couple of hours at the most.
Absolutely.
But your marriage, if you're getting married, that should be where you're investing your energy, because you're saying, I'm committed to you for a lifetime.
Yep. So true. And we see that all the time. It's like you care more about the wedding than you do the marriage, and it should be the opposite.
Exactly.
It should be the opposite. Don't let your relationship fall apart because you fighting over how you're going to navigate the wedding. Right. Be more concerned about the longevity of your marriage and the quality of your marriage. And I think that's where a lot of people are missing it.
I think they get mixed up. And that's not to say don't have the wedding that you desire.
By no means.
I will also say the caveat is have the wedding you can afford.
Right.
So that's not to say not to have a nice wedding. I believe in, celebrating love and celebrating I believe in that. However, there has to be an investment in your marriage. Absolutely. I know, my husband and I went to premarital counseling and I sat in the back because I didn't want to be Dr. Erica Holmes. Right. I didn't want to be the psychologist. No, I'm like, look at him. Yeah. Look at me. What we doing and what we need to do. Like, that was really important for me. And like her, I was like, I would not be married to a man who was not willing to do that. Absolutely. Because we never know, as we're married and continuing this marriage, we might need that again. And I need to know that I have a man who's like, if we need help, we can go and get it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm going to tell you another value about premarital counseling. Here come, truth-telling time. Right. Because a lot of times we go into marriage, we go into premarital counseling because we already have this understanding, or this belief rather, this is the person that I'm going to be with. When in actuality, you go through marriage prep and you begin to realize, well, wait a minute, maybe not. And so you might find yourself going through marriage prep more than once because you done hooked up with the wrong person. So, I'm just
we call that a success.
Right.
When you decide not to get married, that's a success.
Exactly. And the exposure that comes out. So I don't know. I mean, that may not be anybody else's story, but that was my story.
See.
I went through more than once. Okay, this is my second time. The second time I landed well because I married my husband after 18 years of marriage. But the first time.
You asked about the 18 years.
18.
Yeah, exactly.
18.
Yeah.
But the first time I went through marriage prep, I went through with the devil.
Exactly.
That's just where I'm going to leave it. But the thing is, okay, that's not, I needed to find that information out and find out it was valuable because that wasn't working and that's not where I could have, that's not with the person that I could have built my life with. So it can be a success.
I agree it could be a success. And I think with that, it's time to bring in an expert, someone who their whole focus is building quality relationships.
Good.
So stay with us. Give us a second. We're going to come back with Mr. Jeffrey Williams, licensed marriage and family therapist, who's going to give us all the tea about what you need to do before you jump the broom. And just like that, our expert has appeared. Thank you, Jeff, for agreeing to sit down with us on the Living Well set. Once again, we are so happy to have you here. For those of you who haven't seen Jeff on a previous episode, Jeffrey Williams is a licensed marriage and family therapist and is also the owner of Building Healthy Relationships.
Building Quality Relationships.
Building Quality Relationships.com. So I think you are just the right person to talk to us about this idea of doing the work before getting married, right? Before getting married, and really thinking about what that entails and what it can help with. I mean, one of the things that we know is that the numbers show us that Black people are getting married less and divorcing more. Just in your experience, why do you think that is? What are some things that are leading to that?
I think the one of the main things is, one, this is happening across the board, not just with Black folks, but it's happening with other larger numbers with Black people. And part of the reason why is that marriage doesn't hold the same gravitas that it did before. Like, we don't hold it in that same esteem before. Like there used to be shame in our culture. Like if you were dating and living with someone, old folks would say, y'all over there playing house, and there was almost this pressure to do what they thought was the right thing at that particular time. And I think now in the culture, that has shifted. I think the other thing that has happened, there's some sociological stuff that's happening as well. Black women, don't necessarily, like the social construct of marriage, they don't need to be married like they did before. Before there was this thing in the culture where you needed to be married so that there was a safety and there was a security and those type of things. Well, people can do that for themselves. Women can do them for themselves. People have to want to get married now. And I think in a lot of cases, that's not happening. The other part is finding suitable partners. If we believe what a lot of the studies say, that Black women are, college educated 2-to-1 versus Black men, right? So when a person finishes that and they are looking for suitable partners, usually partners that are like-minded and that usually have the same education and similar viewpoints about life as they do, the pool is smaller. And so, and there's a myriad of other reasons, but I think those are the ones that come to mind for me initially.
I really appreciate the fact that you brought up well, several points, but one that stands out to me is this social construct of marriage. And there's a therapist, her name is Esther Perel, and one of the things that she often talks about is that shift in the meaning of marriage or why we get married. And as you mentioned, in the 40s, 50s, 60s even, marriage was about economics, right? So women got married so that they would have someone who was financially take care of them, at financial security. And so what they were looking for in that type of marriage is very different from what you see now. Present day, we've moved from an economic marriage to a love marriage. And so the characteristics or the qualities or the criteria that you're using when you're saying what I'm looking for is companionship, especially if you, as you mentioned, there's disparity in education, there's a disparity in finances and how much money, wage earning. So there are disparities there. And so if I'm looking for now love and companionship, my criteria is very different.
Absolutely.
And what hasn't happened is the way that we socialize and raise both men and women, girls and boys, really hasn't shifted, right? It really hasn't shifted. So you have men who still are like, my role is to be provider, but a society that creates barriers and obstacles for Black men to be that. And so now I get married and I feel inferior because I'm still socialized to believe that is my worth. That is what I bring. And you have women who are like, just by circumstance, because the way that we are oppressed is different, right? It's more likely that they hire a Black woman than a Black man for a lot of reasons we won't get into on this show. And so I'm in a position where I can achieve more. And so now I'm saying, I don't need your money. Just be emotionally available for me. Be a soft place to land. It's like, oh, he's like, I've been socialized to do that because my manhood still lies in money.
Absolutely.
My money equals power, right? So just thinking about, there have been social shifts, but the ways that we are raising and training our children to grow up to be adults, to see their value in relationship and what they bring to relationship, I think hasn't changed. Yeah.
I think I would agree wholeheartedly, and as a result of that, so we've got these young men and that are emotionally unintelligent in that way.
Yeah.
And so when you're talking about a soft place to land, it's just like they don't even know where to put their stuff, let alone their woman's stuff,
Right.
because no one has prepared us to be able to do that,
Yeah.
and made it safe enough for us to do that either. Like, growing up, I remember growing up as a sensitive young man, it would be like, cut out all that crying, cut out all those emotions and all that stuff. And what I realized is that the men around me, and even the young boys who were enforcing that, that were just a little bit older, what they recognized was, or what they were doing, that they were uncomfortable with my emotions at that point. Because mother and father had a divorce. We had just moved across the country with these people that, were family that I barely knew. But at that point, it was just like, what kids would call, I was probably like a little emo kid for a little while, right? Where, you're sad, you're in your feelings, you don't know what's going on, right? And as a result of that, I was able to find an avenue where that works, and was able to be steadfast in sticking with that, knowing that there should be a place for my emotions. But most people just have it socialized out of them, and then they just shut down.
Hence the Black male therapist.
Yes. Yes.
So thinking about, as we're talking about the construct of marriage and what it used to be versus what it is now, and how people are looking at marriages, what do you think people focus on more? Are people focusing on the quantity of marriage, like how long they've been married, or are they looking at the quality of marriage? Which one do you think it matters more?
Oh, well, I'll tell you which one that matters more,
Right.
which is definitely the quality.
Absolutely.
But the quantity is what we tend to celebrate, and I think to some degree should celebrate, right? If you're able to stay together, especially when we talk about these milestone years, 10, 20, 30, 40 years, there is something to be celebrated, and we should be unapologetic and excitedly praising that when that happens. But what happens is, it's almost like when we were in school, and you would get a math problem, and there were certain math problems where if you didn't show your work, if it was simple enough, your teacher would let it go. But then there would be other ones where it's like, if you just put the answer, your teacher was like, well, show your work, right? Because you could have gotten that answer from a friend who was also doing their homework and that type of thing. What we don't do enough is we don't ask married folks to show their work. You know, we're not asking, were those 20 years, are those happy years?
Yes.
Are those years where you all both felt safe in this marriage? Is this 20 years where you were very secure and you treated each other as partners in this particular marriage? And I think as a result of that, of not showing our work, we have these large numbers, but we don't necessarily have we haven't passed down the wisdom in order to be able to teach others and prepare others to be able to do that at a large enough level.
That's good. I'm glad you said that, because we know of so many people who like to celebrate, as you said, 30, 40 years of marriage, and the message sometimes can be you hang in there no matter what. But the work that's not being spoken about is, what is the quality of this marriage? What has it been? 30 years of marriage is just hell, you know? And when you hold on to that information, then you present this idea that everything is all fine and wonderful. And sometimes that information is even passed down to children. You know, because that we observe mama and daddy be married for 35 years, but we don't know what went into that marriage. And so I think that I like that you said that it is about showing the work. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like you said, sometimes you don't get to 35 years of marriage without going through something.
Oh, absolutely.
You know,
Anybody that's been married for a little while knows
absolutely
that you have to go through something.
Absolutely. And the same can be said about a marriage that it maybe is only 10 years. So I think I think the success might very well lie in the quality of the marriage, whether it's 20 years, whether it's 5 years. So I think that that's a very important message.
Yeah, I also would say that a danger, I think, of that is what we're seeing in young people today, because a lot of young people will say they don't want to get married. Why get married? And I think a danger is that some younger folks have seen their parents' marriage and what went on that was unhealthy, and them saying, I don't want that. If that's what marriage is, I don't want that. And, you know, so when there's that, dare I use the word hypocrisy? So, right, what they show on the outside, you know, woo, it's 25 years, but then you have children that you've raised in that household who know what's happened behind closed doors, and they're like, I don't want that. And that's in a marriage, and that also happens in a dating relationship, right? That, you know, if the parent wasn't married and they just saw them dating or having really unhealthy relationships, and the kids are like, yeah, I don't want that. And especially if they haven't had any images of happy, healthy marriages where there's conflict is settled, where there's commitment and all of those things, they're looking like marriages are horrible.
Absolutely.
You know, relationships are horrible. And then you have the flip side of that, I think. Some people, especially the research shows that currently almost 80% of children born to Black mothers, American Black mothers, are born out of wedlock. Almost 80%, 79% at the last tallying. And so you have a lot of children who now that doesn't mean that the parents or the mother or the parent don't get married later on or they find step families, but you have a lot of children who are growing up in homes where they haven't seen marriage, right? Where they've never seen that modeled, or they saw it later on. And so it's not marriage from the beginning, it is older with children and blended families. And so I think sometimes for people, if they've never seen marriage modeled, or kind of going to your statement, if they've seen marriage modeled, but the parents never showed them the hard times, they can develop fantasies about marriage, right? They could look at marriages on TV like the Huxtables, like, oh, this is what marriage is supposed to be. You know, nobody ever yells. Bill yelled a couple of times on the show, but you know, Felicia Rashad never, Claire never yelled. So they have these fantasies. Like, when I get married, we gonna be in love every day, every moment of every day. You know, we're gonna chase each other every day, all day. And so all those kind of fantasies. So what are some of the fantasies you've seen people go into marriage with that can really set them up for disappointment when they face the realities of actually being married?
I think one of the ones that comes to mind for me is that we have to think alike in order to be compatible.
Yes.
You know, we have to think the same way on every subject, right? Look, there are some core values and things that you must think alike on in order to be married. But there are other things where if we allow for different ways of thought, and we don't, and just because they're foreign to us, don't turn them into faults or issues. If we can allow that, it can really create a richness in marriage, because we can start to see how other people view things. Someone that we really love, how they view things. You know, because you love this person, you trust this person, you can be introduced to things that maybe you would have never tried by yourself.
Right.
But now this person ushered you through this thing, and your life is so much more vibrant as a result. And so that's one of the things that come to mind for me.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. I know my husband is so much a thrill seeker. He's a thrill seeker. And I'm grounded. I'm like, I cannot fly nor swim. So I need to be on stable ground. But Lord knows on the honeymoon, he had me up there parasailing. I was like, Jesus, if you just let me off. He was like, look at this. I'm not looking at nothing. I just want to get back on the boat, get me over this water. But some of the adventures that we've had together, I would have never had he not been in my life and, you know, pulled me out of my, like, no, I just want to sit on the beach and read a book. Like, no, we're going to go zip lining. So I do think that idea that we have to think about, and just think how boring it would be if you were with somebody that thought exactly like you.
Absolutely. What's that saying that, like, if both of you think the same, then one of you is not needed?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Somebody is unnecessary in this equation. And I do. And, you know, I think that goes along with, you know, this fantasy of we will never get on each other's nerves. We will never need time alone. Right? If you need time away from me, I'm not saying move out. I'm saying, I'm gonna go in the room and you sit in the den and then we, just saying if you ever feel that, then there's something wrong.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that at all. Like, I'm by nature probably more of an introvert, and so introverts fuel in solitude.
Yes.
And so, like, I can be extroverted, I can go and do those things, but when I do, I'm beat. I'm tired, and I need to go somewhere and sit down. I need to go refuel. I need to go read. I need to go listen to podcasts. I need to just, just deep breathe because I've been around so many folks. And I'm married to a person who's more extroverted, who enjoys speaking to people, talking to people, laughing, and all of those things. Again, things that I enjoy, but aren't necessarily a strength. And so, there's what we've learned is the time away actually is the thing that refuels me in order to be able to come back and be my best self in the relationship.
Right.
Yeah. I think that's one of those. We're talking about this idea of appreciating the differences in, our spouses and understanding and accepting them as opportunities as opposed to a reason for there to be conflict. Because sometimes if we can't accept the differences in our spouses, it can create an opportunity for conflict. And that conflict can be good. However, it doesn't have to be this, resistance. Instead, it's an opportunity to grow. It's an opportunity to experience something different. It's an opportunity to come out of your shell, those kinds of things. And it's an opportunity to keep it spicy. So the differences are really, really, I think they're worth being celebrated. With that being said, when we're talking about fantasies, and we know how sometimes it can set couples up, if they don't have a clear idea about it. And we know now that prevention, trying to prevent things, problems and conflict, and learning how to solve conflict is so much better than having to have an intervention. So what are some things that people should know, like when it comes to getting married, what are some things that they should know ahead of time before actually entering into marriage?
Look, I think you should know your viewpoints on major topics that always come up in marriage. So, money is one of those big things in marriage, right? We should know who's the saver and who's the spender, who's better with money before we go into this. And we can set things up for us to have financial success going into this relationship. We should be talking about sex. We should be talking about appetite, frequency, what we're looking for, what expectations there are. We should be talking about that before we go into the relationship. What I would largely suggest most of the time, if you can do it, is to sit down with a counselor. There are countless measures out there now that you can go, that you can spend 20 to 30 minutes filling out, that will spit out information on what things that you agree on, what things that may be some challenges or some growth edges, if you will, in your relationship. And that can be really important. I think for me, as a child of divorce, we went through premarital counseling with a therapist, but we both wanted those successful marriages. You talk about the Huxtables, like that was a role model for me. That was one of the few role models of successful marriage for me. So it was like, I want that, but I don't know very many people who have that.
Right.
So I read everything. My wife and I read so much. We were really fortunate. There were one or two members at our church who would allow us in their home, and we were able to observe it.
Yeah.
But the reading and the spending time and the getting wisdom, sage wisdom for others was really helpful. What I also know is that you two now are in this, have a book that is in the landscape now. Let's talk about what you guys are adding to. I don't want to take over your show. I'm not hosting anything, but let's talk about your book.
Well, since you mentioned it, we did just have a book come out earlier this year called Before the Broom, a premarital workbook for dating, engaged, and newly married African American couples. And it is a workbook that really centers the phenomenological experiences of African Americans in our country. Like, as you mentioned earlier, some of the assaults on marriage in the United States is being felt across the board, regardless of race. And what we also know in that is that what was said during COVID, that when America gets a cold, the Black community gets pneumonia, right? The same applies to what's happening to African American marriages. As I mentioned earlier, the statistics on unwed parenthood in the United States, Black women are getting married less often. When they do get married, they get married older. And so we see it kind of as an assault on Black marriages. And there are some things that I don't think that we really acknowledge from our history, because the country hasn't given us a permission to do that. So people say that it's an excuse, but we know in our field, and what the research and literature continues to show, is that our history in America and also the continued racism and oppression that we live under continues to invade our marriages and our relationships. And so there was nothing in the marketplace when you look at premarital counseling and education that really focused on helping us to understand how generations of oppression and racism impact the way that we do relationships and how we maneuver in relationships.
Right. You know, when we were doing the research, again, coming across knowing what the numbers are, I think when you look at that data, it can erroneously have people to believe either Black folks don't want to be married or we don't know how to stay married. And, you know, I'm of the opinion that that's not true. And so this idea of really tapping into our history so that we can have some insight and understanding about how and why we are navigating the way we do, and then be able to provide a space for reflection to take place between couples, asking questions, thinking about how history has really shown up and impacted the relationship. Why do I think this way? Why do I behave this way? Well, I saw mom and them do it. And even if you decide you want something different than what you were introduced to and or exposed to in your family of origin, there still needs to be this awareness like, okay, this has somehow formed and shaped how I think and move. And now when I prepare myself for a relationship, is this the best way? Or do I need to take into consideration the ways of my spouse? So I think it's important to help couples. We thought it was important to help couples really think. You talk about asking the difficult questions or asking the right questions. And so part of our work is about asking those questions that most people are not being asked, particularly in the Black relationships.
You guys are right. Like, you know, I've read a lot of what is in the marketplace, especially for that. And there's a black hole. It doesn't exist. And so now, with this book, one, I wish you guys much success.
Well, thank you.
But I also believe that it is going to speak to people who have been underserved in that way, and give them an actual manual.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
That's true.
Right.
Because bottom line, everybody deals with finance, communication, you know, some may or may not deal with blended family. I mean, there's some core issues that we know show up in marriages. But the fact of the matter is that Black relationships have to navigate these issues very different because nobody else has the same history that we have.
Absolutely.
So we have to navigate them differently.
Like, for example, one thing that we talk about in the book, for example, that we often don't talk about in polite conversation and where we're dating, or we don't even reflect on ourselves. Like, one of the things we ask you to do in the book is, you know, reflect on the stereotypes that you grow up hearing and seeing about Black men and black women, regardless of which one you are. Like, we hear stereotypes, we see stereotypes, we see in the media, you know, that the pictures that they show are all often Black and brown men committing these crimes. So to grow up seeing that, hearing that, whether you are whichever gender, because there's stereotypes about both of our genders, that can't help but sit somewhere in you. Like, it doesn't just, oh, no, I believe Black men are great. They're wonderful beings and they're, you know, flowers and sunshine. Or they say, no, it sits somewhere. So what happens when you are in intense fellowship, right? Having a conflict in your marriage, do any of those stereotypes kind of fuel the way that you react or respond to your mate? Do they kind of come up in some ways when you're having a conversation? Let's say you're married and your husband, let's say just using your husband, loses his job. Do any of those stereotypes fuel a fear that's like, oh no, well, Black men don't want to work anyway? So then you start like, when you gonna get a job? How you gonna get a job? Not that he shouldn't work. That's not what I'm saying. But your response to an event may be impacted based on your history and knowledge of or experience with stereotypes about, you know, people, you know, of the,
No, that's good. That is good. Having us investigate
Yeah.
that while preparing
Yeah.
for marriage. That sounds like that's going to be phenomenal.
I think
hope
so.
so.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. So thank you for mentioning our book. But I did want to give you just an opportunity to say, what are some ways that people who are thinking about marriage or in serious relationship, what are some ways that they can kind of set themselves up for success?
One of the things that comes to mind is understanding what it is that what is this marriage for? You know, why do I want to get married? Do I want to get married because I want somebody to cook and clean for me? Do I want to get married because I want someone to take care of me? Do I want to get married because I'm in love and we want to build something? I think everyone needs to understand why they're coming in and what are some of those things. Like, that's why I'm excited about what you were talking about in your book, because those are some of the things that we need to think about before we even enter into this, because everyone has a reason to do it and we're not always clear on why. And so that would be one of the main things for me. I think if I had to think about more, it would be, what do you want? Like, do you want children? How is that going to work? Like, I don't think we ask enough questions early on. And that's why I believe so much in premarital counseling. That's why I believe so much in because we don't ask enough questions. I think it just feels good. Like what happens is, the dopamine and the oxytocin and the sexual tension and all of the other things that we feel in the beginning of relationships, we think that that's going to propel us and we're going to move forward and we're just going to want to be on fire for one another all the time. But as that wanes, because it will wane or it will go up and down.
Yeah.
What are we really built on? How do our faith traditions impact it?
Yes.
Right.
How do our family of origins impact what it is that we're doing? Those are some of the things that I would.
What do we want? What are we getting married for? I think that is a pivotal question. I think that is like, it could just stop there.
Right.
Why do I want to get married? I think that if people just stop and reflect, and doing premarital counseling, talking to someone before, can help to expand you beyond what's going on biologically and chemically in your body. Expand you beyond, bring you back into what we call this frontal lobe of the brain, so you can really think about it and think it through. Well, that is our time. Mr. Jeffrey Williams, we again really thank you, appreciate you for coming in. Tell people where they can find you again.
You can find me at buildingqualityrelationships.com. And I'm there to kind of serve the community and help build relationships, help strengthen relationships, even if that relationship is with yourself.
Oh,
Excellent.
all right. I
That.
love it. I love it. Well, thank you all for joining us on another episode of Living Well. And as always, we like to leave you with a resource, something that you can continue to kind of read, learn, expand your knowledge until our next episode. So, of course, this week, we want to point you to our new book, Before the Broom, a premarital workbook for dating engaged and newly married African-American couples. You can find this anywhere where books are sold, online, Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, all the great places. So pick it up if you are even considering being in a committed relationship. And until next time, we pray that you are living well. For more information and resources, be sure to check us out at normalizehelp.org. And you can always email us at livingwell@faithfamily.org to get a question answered or to tell us a story. You never know, your question might make it to air or be the subject of one of our episodes. See you next week.
time to shine that light that lives in you. Living well. It's not too late to change. Now it's time 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 to change. Time to change. Time to change.